If you would like the beginning of your sentences in your children's book to be more colorful and more exciting, and if you want to improve your story's flow, then this video is for you. Hi there, I'm Eevi, an award-winning children's author and ghostwriter over on eevijones.com and the creator of Children's Book University. I create videos specifically for children's authors, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss my weekly videos. Not too long ago, I made a video on how to begin or open our beautiful children's book, sharing 8 creative ways that help our little readers connect with our story from the very first page of our book. I've added the link to that video in the description below. Now in this video, I would like to zoom into our story and look at 8 fun alternative ways we can begin our individual sentences. Not just the beginning of our story, but the beginning of our sentences throughout our story. Because here's the problem. Having held hundreds of one-on-one feedback sessions where my Children's Book University students and clients ask me for feedback on their stories, something that I see all the time is that many of us begin our sentences pretty much the same way over and over again. We simply either restate the name of our characters or we replace the names with pronouns. Like this example right here. Peter was a 4-year-old. He loved playing with his friends, and he loved pretending to be a pirate. Peter would take an old cardboard box, cut out some, and then so on. These are 4 consecutive or back-to-back sentences, and they all begin the same way, either with the character's name or with the character's pronoun. So it is very repetitive. Doing so is very common. Now, here's my first ninja tip. Beginning our sentences with the character's name or pronoun is absolutely okay. But we do want to make sure we switch it up if we have more than 2 consecutive sentences that begin that way. In other words, we want to make sure we are switching up our beginnings so that our sentences don't start the same way over and over again. Especially when it's our first time writing a children's book, we may have a hard time coming up with alternative beginnings for our sentences. And oftentimes we don't even notice that we are doing this. I remember when I wrote one of my first children's books many years ago. It wasn't until I received this little nudge from one of my editors who suggested I change up my beginnings that I started to be more intentional about how I begin each of my sentences. And so I hope that with this video, I'm the one giving you this gentle nudge, because tweaking the beginning of our sentences just a little bit really will make such an incredible difference and will take our story to the next level. So let's look at 8 alternative ways we can begin our sentences. Some tweaks will add just 1 new word to the beginning of our sentences, and others may require a bit more. But each tweak is meant to prevent us from beginning our sentences the same way over and over again. Just a quick side note here before jumping in. These tweaks will work whether we write our story in first or second or third person, and whether we write it in the past tense or the present tense. It doesn't really matter. If you have any questions regarding the tense we should be writing our story in or what perspective to use, I've added the link to my separate video on just that in the description below. Throughout this video, I will illustrate the different tweaks using this sentence right here. Peter went up the hill, or he went up the hill. And so we are looking to find different ways to begin these sentences. Tweak number 1 is to simply replace the character's name or pronoun. Here, instead of using the name Peter or the pronoun he, we can simply replace them. Here are 3 examples. The little boy went up the hill. The curious lad went up the hill. The 5-year-old boy went up the hill. Here we can ask ourselves questions like, who is this character? What are some characteristics we could mention? How old is this character? By asking ourselves these questions, we are not just changing the beginning of our sentences, but we're also helping our little readers learn just a tiny bit more about our characters. For example, here we learned that the boy is little, that he is curious, or his age. Tweak number 2 is to begin our sentence with a descriptive adjective. Here are some fun examples. Exhausted, Peter went up the hill, or absolutely exhausted, Peter went up the hill, or even more exhausted than ever, Peter went up the hill. All upset, Peter went up the hill. Happy, Peter went up the hill. Disappointed, Peter went up the hill. All tuckered out, Peter went up the hill. All alone, Peter went up the hill. Now we don't just know that Peter went up the hill, but also how he may have felt. Here we can ask ourselves questions like, what does my character feel, or what mood is my character in? This is such a great alternative way to begin our sentences and so often overlooked. Again, it helps us change up our beginnings, and using this tweak will help us weave in some of the feelings our characters might be feeling or having. Tweak number 3 is to begin our sentence with a descriptive adverb. Here are some examples. Quietly, Peter went up the hill. Slowly, Peter went up the hill. Nervously, Peter went up the hill. Briskly, Peter went up the hill. Now we don't just know that Peter went up the hill, but also how he went up that hill. Here we can ask ourselves, how did my character walk, talk, or whatever you had them do in your story? Using this tweak, we again don't just change up the beginning of our sentence. We are also describing how our character is doing whatever they are doing, whether they did something quickly or slowly or nervously. Tweak number 4 is to begin our sentence with a descriptive phrase that is a bit longer than just an adjective or adverb. Here are some examples. Not wanting to be late, Peter went up the hill. Completely out of breath, Peter went up the hill. With his head hanging low, Peter went up the hill. Holding his mother's hand, Peter went up the hill. Pulling his sled behind him, Peter went up the hill. Eating a banana, Peter went up the hill. Despite the weather, Peter went up the hill. Here we can ask ourselves, what other details can I share about my character? Besides walking, what else is Peter doing here? Is he eating a banana, or is it pouring down on him? If so, why not use it and mention that in the story? Adding a little descriptive phrase again changes up the beginning of our sentences, and it gives us an opportunity to weave in a little more about our character, making our story even more colorful. Tweak number 5 is to begin our sentence sharing the frequency with which something is done. Here are some examples. Over and over again, Peter went up the hill. Every Friday, Peter went up the hill. About once a month, Peter went up the hill. Here we can ask ourselves, how often does our character do something? This one won't always be applicable to our sentences, but absolutely still worth mentioning because again, it's such a quick and easy way to weave in just a little more detail about our story, while at the same time, it's allowing us to change up the beginning of our sentences. Tweak number 6 is to begin our sentence sharing the time at which something is done. Here are some examples. At noon, Peter went up the hill. Late that night, Peter went up the hill. That night, Peter went up the hill. Once the sun set behind the horizon, Peter went up the hill. Every time the bell rang, Peter went up the hill. When Peter was 8 years old, he went up the hill. Here we can ask ourselves, when did our character do something? This when could be very broad or very detailed and weaves in just a little bit more information about our story with very few words. Tweak number 7 is to begin our sentence sharing the location at which this particular part of our story takes place. Here are some examples. In the little town of York, Peter went up the hill. In the middle of the forest, Peter went up the hill. Right behind the field, Peter went up the hill. Not too far from his grandma's house, Peter went up the hill. Here we can ask ourselves, where did this part of our story take place? Again, we add something relevant to our story and change up the way we begin our sentences. And finally, tweak number 8 is a little bonus technique, and that's to simply reverse the order in our sentences. So instead of saying Peter went up the hill, we could simply reverse the order and say, and up the hill he went. I use this technique all the time because I feel it makes these sentences a bit more fun and a little bit unexpected too. In the beginning, we looked at 4 consecutive sentences, all beginning the same way, either using the name or the pronoun of the character. So let's see what these 4 sentences could look like after applying some of these tweaks. Our previous example said, Peter was 4 years old. He loved playing with his friends, and he loved pretending to be a pirate. Peter would take an old cardboard box, cut out some, and so on. Our slightly tweaked version could read something like this. Peter was 4 years old. Always ready for an adventure, he loved playing with his friends. One of his favorite activities was to pretend to be a pirate. First, Peter would take an old cardboard box, cut out some, and then so on. Now, the beginning of these 4 consecutive sentences are all different. We have a beginning with the name, followed by 2 sentences that begin with a description, and the 4th one begins with a time. And we did all this by simply adding just a few more words to the beginning of our sentences. These tweaks are so simple, yet they can make such a big difference. So whenever we see more than 2 consecutive sentences that begin the same way, we can easily change it up by using one of our 8 techniques and asking ourselves, if we were to describe this scene, what would I say? How would I describe it? And then use that to spruce up and change up the beginning of our sentences. So if you're currently writing your story, and even if your story is already written, I would encourage you to reread it, looking specifically for more than 2 back-to-back sentences that begin nearly the same. Unless it's for emphasis, this should not be, and we can make our story instantly more professional by tweaking them using any of the 8 techniques I just shared with you. And in the meantime, we can train our brain. This is my second ninja tip for this video. Whenever we are reading a book, whether that's for grown-ups or a children's book, it helps so much to pay attention to how the different authors begin their sentences. The more we look for those, the more wonderful examples we will find that we can then use as inspiration for our own children's book. I so hope you found this video helpful on how we can make the beginnings of our sentences more colorful and more exciting. It goes hand in hand with my separate videos on how to write the beginning of our story, how to write a powerful ending, the most important dialogue rules, and the best tense and best perspectives for our children's book. I have added the links to all of these videos in the description below. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't yet. It really encourages me to keep making free videos for you just like this one. Here's to writing a wonderful and creative story. Bye!